And thank you to the NDC London organizers for having me here. I studied abroad in London many years ago, so it's really exciting to be back here. And today I'll be talking to you about how we can build better products by engaging hard-to-reach users. So I'm going to give you a minute to read through some of these headlines that summarize what's been going on in our industry. So this is what we get when we don't challenge our assumptions. And today I'm going to share with you 4 methods that you can use to challenge your assumptions so you can avoid headlines like those and instead build better and more impactful products for your audience. And actually, before I continue, sometimes I'm not very good at telling if I'm projecting loud enough. I do have my hearing aids on, so I'll trust the back of the room to keep me posted. Thank you. So the 4 methods I'll share today are really helping us think about product development in a different way at the Ad Council. And I hope that today some of these methods will inspire you on how you might apply them back into your work. Just a little context on what the Ad Council is. We're a nonprofit organization in America that leverages the power of communication to tackle some of the biggest issues in the nation, from preventing wildfires to promoting girls in STEM to diversity and inclusion and getting people out there to vote. What we do is we partner up and leverage the industry leaders to create campaigns that inspire action and create change. And our campaigns incorporate everything from public service advertising to out-of-home to social media activations and digital experiences. And as the director of innovation at this nonprofit organization, my task at hand is to think about how do we facilitate innovative thinking within our teams, as well as how to cultivate a culture where experimentation and curiosity can thrive. And I get to do that in many ways, including training our entire staff on Splashbox, which is our approach to innovation. And it incorporates frameworks and methods from lean, agile, and human-centered design. To date, I've trained 80% of the company. And what that allows is for us to have a shared language and shared approach to innovation, and knowing that we'll apply the tools where it makes sense. And to make the learnings from a training become more tangible, we created a project where our new innovators can apply these frameworks and methods that they learned to create a digital prototype for a campaign issue. And I'm really excited to walk you through one of these digital prototype projects where our assumptions definitely got in our way, and we had to use those 4 methods to challenge our assumptions. So the campaign issue we chose was teen bullying prevention. And the task at hand was, well, how do we leverage the power of technology to answer this question, which is how might we influence teens to reduce peer mistreatment and empower one another by building and perpetuating a more empathetic, supportive, and inclusive culture. Our target audience for this work was teens ranging from the ages 13 to 17 that also fall under the category of good eggs. We defined good eggs as teens that are just, in general, feel like they're good people. They want to be the best version of themselves. And they aspire to treat others with kindness and respect. And we really, this project was so exciting for us because we wanted to create a more inclusive and empathetic world for our next generation. Me personally, this project really resonated because I've had experience with bullying firsthand. How many of you can relate to that? Some, yes, exactly. My family and I, we immigrated from Bangladesh to New York City when I was about 7 years old. And I quickly learned that the color of my skin was different enough to be made fun of. It was the first time that I was different. And then the clothes that we could afford was just not that, just wasn't cool enough. And when I was diagnosed with profound hearing loss, requiring me to wear hearing aids definitely did not make me popular. Instead, my classmates would steal my hearing aids and hide them as a joke. And let me tell you, that was not funny. But what hurt even more was when my guidance counselor in middle school advised me to not pursue my dream. See, I was in middle school, and I wanted to go to a specialized science high school in New York to pursue my dream in becoming an engineer. But she did not think I was capable, so she advised me to not take the entry exam. See, I still wanted to take the test, at least give it a shot. But I didn't want to tell anyone because I didn't want to get in trouble. So the night before the exam, not having a chance to study, I forged my mother's signature on the permission slip to allow me to take this test. It was literally the scariest thing I had ever done. I'm happy to say I passed. And I got into a school called Brooklyn Tech High School, which put me on a path to study biomechanical engineering at university, study abroad in London, and to be here with you. See, that experience with my classmates and my guidance counselor taught me that the things that make me unique are the same things that lead others to treat me differently, make assumptions about my capability, and to decide what opportunities I should have access to. So at a very young age, I learned how lonely, confusing, defeating, and mentally draining it is to be bullied and to be treated differently. And as an adult, it's made me realize how profound a childhood experience can be and how much it can transform your whole life. So knowing the potential of impact for this project, we really dug in and did a tremendous amount of research. We read reports and articles on Gen Zs. We interviewed teachers, issue experts, and teens themselves to really familiarize ourselves with the audience and the issue. And our research generated a ton of insights that led us to create over 100 ideas and 20 concept designs. We then showed our strongest ideas to teens to get some early feedback. Which ideas should we refine, how should we refine them, and which ideas should we leave behind. After rounds of interviews and getting early feedback from teens, we felt pretty solid on our direction. We knew that our solution needed to address these 3 goals. 1, we need to help teens successfully recognize the impact of their actions. See, our campaign research told us that good eggs have this inherent sense of responsibility to want to create the change they want to see in the world. So we wanted to leverage that and help teens successfully see the impact of their actions so that they can choose the kinder behaviors. 2, we should double down on social media. We knew that 91% of teens were on at least one social media platform. And they spend about 9 hours on them. So we knew we needed to emphasize and really prioritize the role social media would play in this solution. 3rd, leverage the rise of CGI influencers. How many of you know what a CGI influencer is? Awesome. Okay, we got 1. 2? So at the time, there were 4 fictional characters created by computer-generated imagery that were influencers on Instagram that have accumulated over 1 million followers. We were like, what is this? We had no idea about this new megatrend, but we knew we needed to leverage that in some way, somehow, whether it's through modeling kindness to teens or by storytelling. So keeping those 3 goals in mind, we took our 28 concepts and refined them into 5 promising ideas. And then we showed them again to teens to get some early feedback to know which direction to go. So the key thing that we learned from the feedback we got was that we were wrong on all fronts. The things we were looking at as goals were actually just assumptions, starting with the word bullying. It turns out that the only people that use the word bullying are adults that are trying to end bullying. When we ask teens to recall moments where they experienced bullying, they didn't really have much to share. But then when we reframed and asked about moments that they might have been mistreated, or they've hurt someone, or they've been hurt, suddenly we were hearing stories about being excluded, drama, rumors. So their language around mistreatment was completely different. And it turns out that they're actually pretty self-aware and aware of their actions. When we ask them to recall moments of when they've hurt someone, they used words like hurt, upset, regret to describe how they felt afterwards. So that shows that they're aware of the impact their actions have. And they also value privacy and authenticity way more than we realized, to the point where they have 2 different Instagram accounts. One is called the Finsta, which stands for the fake Instagram account, where they post unfiltered content, and they keep it private, and they limit who can find them. And the other one is the Rinsta, which stands for real Instagram account, which they keep hyper-curated with perfect filters and captions, and this is where they want more followers. And when it came to CGI influencers, it turns out only a few of them even knew what that was. And those that were even following a CGI influencer was only doing it out of curiosity of the character's fashion. Very different from where we are heading. And if you look at their handwritten feedback, I don't know if that does anything. If you look at their handwritten feedback, what you notice is what they wanted instead was someone relatable, someone who might have had a bad childhood, someone who went through issues, and someone funny. Really, I think they just wanted Kevin Hart. So our assumptions were checked. And before I go into the 4 methods we used to uncover and challenge our assumptions, I want to talk about assumptions for a moment. See, an assumption is a belief that we accept to be true without any evidence. And the reason it's so easy for our assumptions and biases to creep up even after rounds of research is because our brain is always creating assumptions in the interest of efficiencies. See, the thing is, over the course of 200,000 years, our brain created mental shortcuts to help us cope and to help our species survive and cope with the world around us, right? So we have mental shortcuts that help us make sense of large amounts of information, determine what's important enough to remember or recall, create explanations when we don't have enough contextual cues, and to know how to act quickly. This is how we learn and remember how to ride a bike, know the answer to 2 + 2, know how to recognize joy and frustration in people's voices, as well as when to run from perceived danger. But these are the same shortcuts that cause us to jump to conclusions, make snap judgments, miss certain facts, and then make decisions based on our biases. Some of these shortcuts are also commonly known as cognitive biases, and we have about 180 of them. So you can imagine if we have so many of them, it's going to be tricky to be able to recognize when our assumptions, when these shortcuts are getting in the way and our biases are at play. I'll call out 3 that caught us off guard. See, one mental shortcut causes us to be easily influenced by what is stored in our memory or what's familiar. This is why we keep using the word bullying to identify that interaction instead of gut checking with our audience, like, is this language still relevant? Does it actually resonate? Another mental shortcut causes us to make judgments and impressions by solely relying on the information made available to us. When we see numbers as high as 91% of teens are on social media, or they spend 9 hours of their waking hours on these platforms, we easily place a lot of value on these numbers and start making assumptions without even realizing. Like, they must be on it all the time, and they must be sharing everything, every portion of their life into these social media platforms. We don't readily ask or look for what's missing, right? So does that entire 91% act the same way on social media? Do they use the same features to the same extent? We don't know. And who's not captured in that 91%? And so what? They have an account. That tells us nothing. And the last mental shortcut that I'll call out is we're drawn to details that confirm our own existing beliefs. See, we were so excited about leveraging this new CGI megatrend that we were paying closer attention to headlines that claimed that CGI influencers were the future of influencer marketing, leaving us completely blinded and surprised when teens were not equally excited about CGI influencers. And that's how easy it is for our mental shortcuts that are designed to help us cope and survive to get in the way of us making products that are right for our audience. So for the rest of my talk, I'll focus on how we use these 4 methods in the teen bullying prevention prototype project. And I hope it gives you some inspiration on how to bring some of these methods back into your work. And the first one being map assumptions. It's an activity where we are actively looking to uncover critical uncertainties, unknowns, and blind spots about the audience, the challenge that we're trying to solve, and solutions that we're exploring. And the thing about assumptions is that they don't feel or look like assumptions in the beginning. They just feel like facts. So that's why it's super critical to have a diverse team so that everyone can work together to catch each other's blind spots and assumptions. And to do that, we started by asking ourselves questions around teens and and their experience with mistreatment. You know, how does it show up? How do they resolve it? How does it impact them? And when we mapped our assumptions, we quickly realized that despite all the research we've already done, we still didn't know that much. So to prioritize which unknowns to go after, we mapped them on a 2x2 grid like this, where the x-axis ranged from known to unknown, and the y-axis ranged from very important to not that important at this point in the project. And what this helped us tease out were like, what are the knowledge gaps that we need to really figure out right now before we move even further? Including the biggest question of all, do teens need a bunch of adults to solve for bullying? So then we did a bunch of user interviews to dig into these critical unknowns to understand, like, to get signals on which direction to go. And after rounds of doing interviews with teens and gathering insights and ideations, we had these 20 concepts that we felt really good about, but we had no idea which one would work. So instead of just picking one and hoping for the best, we decided to test 5 of our strongest at the same time. So we ran several experiments to explore, you know, does our idea actually create the desired outcome? And what new knowledge can we gather? And while mapping assumptions is a great place to start, testing our hypotheses allows us to tease out assumptions that we did not even think of in the beginning. Okay. So in order to test hypotheses, we did 2 things. We converted our ideas into hypothesis statements to really get specific on, like, what are we thinking our ideas will create? What impact? And that also helps us understand what are we hoping to learn from doing a test around them. And then we also identified our riskiest assumptions, which are the beliefs we hold about our ideas that, if disproven, would break our idea altogether. To convert our ideas into hypothesis statements, we use a Mad Lib framework like this, where we fill it in the brackets with what's specific to our project. And it helps us identify and align a team on, like, what are we actually thinking we're solving? What do we think our solution will do? And how do we think our audience will engage with the solution to create that desired outcome? I'm going to demonstrate this with you with the CGI influencers as an example. So our hypothesis would look something like this. We believe that teens have a problem noticing the impact of their actions, which leads them to mistreat each other. We believe that a fictional CGI character whose life captures the dramatic realities of the teen experience, including teachable moments where the character models kindness, can help. And we believe that teens will follow and relate to the character, causing them to reflect and adopt the model's positive behaviors in real life. So you can see how it walks you through the idea in itself, the audience, and the interaction. And then to identify our riskiest assumption, we asked ourselves the question, what must be true in order for this idea to add any value to our audience, for it to be used and create impact? And then we looked through our answers to identify the ones that, if disproven, would break our idea altogether. So what stood out to be the riskiest assumption for this idea was our belief that teens will really resonate with a CGI character. See, if they don't connect at all with this fictional influencer, then this whole idea breaks apart. But at least if we can figure this out right in the upfront, then we don't waste time building it or learning how to even create one. So we did this for all 5 ideas. And when we did that, we ended up with a list of interactions and features that we were just hoping that teens would love and engage with, but we had no proof that any of them would work. So they had to be tested before we moved any further. Like, does anonymity really matter for teens? Would they answer honestly to prompts and questions? And how much do they really value influencers? But we wanted to test them without building anything. So we used open-ended survey questions, rough sketches, and prototypes during user interviews and user workshops to get their feedback on these prototypes. While testing multiple hypotheses were super insightful, there is a limit to how much you can learn by testing, because our audience is only reacting and responding to things we're showing them and questions we're asking them, and not anything else. And that's why engaging, working with, and empowering our users for them to generate their own ideas became super powerful for us. What we did was we worked with a local high school to put together user workshops. And so we got to do 3 co-creation sessions with high school students. It helped us understand, how do they perceive bullying today? What digital interactions do they really enjoy and why? Test our existing hypotheses and assumptions, the ones that I just told you how to create, and then create space for our audience to create solutions of their own. This is a snapshot of what some of the teens created when we asked them to design a digital tool that could help people be kinder and more inclusive of others. We purposely avoided language like bullying or teens to stay away from driving them in any one direction. And then the co-creation sessions in general validated some of our hypotheses as well as invalidating others. And then what we did was we took all of our learnings and then created 3 co-created prototypes to move forward with. See, co-creations are also great because they help to uncover ideas that you couldn't brainstorm on your own. For instance, one team came up with this great idea called "in my bag," which is a phrase teens use to indicate that they're feeling sad or they're feeling emotional. This is an app that would allow people to either airdrop or send messages or alert their friends when they're feeling emotionally unavailable and they want to be left alone. The key insight here is, we already know that they're self-aware. What this shows us is that they have the desire and awareness to prevent that mistreatment moment to happen, and they're able to and want to self-regulate. And they want to use a method that's most accessible for them. So we got feedback on this idea as well, and you can see it was very validating and exciting what teens said about this idea. They used words like, it's fire. And you can tell people around you how you're actually feeling. And what this showed us was, they wanted to express their feelings and emotions, which is completely contrary to their existing social pressure of acting tough. So it's been a journey. We've gone from identifying opportunities to researching how to solve it, to coming up with over 100 ideas, to testing our promising ideas and co-designing solutions with our end users. And there were many moments that our ideas were invalidated and our assumptions got checked. But that's what learning looks like. And even though we made a tremendous amount of progress, it did not come easily. We had to go out of our way to find a diverse mix of teens to interview, get permission from their parents. We had to find a local high school that was even open to doing a user workshop, get parents to sign permission slips, work around exam and homework schedules, and then be completely okay if a teen decided to flake on a phone interview. But that relentless effort was worth it, because the audience we were looking to serve was not in the room, and their perspective really mattered to influence the solutions we're creating. And I think a huge part of creating relentless culture and space in our teams is also making sure we have a set of questions that keep us aligned with our users' needs and ethical standards and our product goals. We must ask ourselves questions like these. Are we still solving the challenge that our users actually need solved? What perspectives are not inside the room that we may need to engage with outside? And what other hypotheses needs to be tested? Can our audience still use, access, understand, and get value from this? Sometimes somewhere between the inception of an idea to the thing that gets deployed, a lot of things change. So we have to constantly check, is this still working? Is this still accessible? And what are the unintended consequences of this existing in the world? And what could someone with malintentions do with this? And I think to empower our teams to be this relentless, we must create a culture where a great sense of curiosity and innovation can thrive. But what does that even mean and look like? It's a team where there's less of monoculture of thoughts and ideas. And instead, what we're doing is we're encouraging people to seek perspectives that are unlike their own, where we spend less time on defending our own idea and instead prioritize testing multiple hypotheses and ideas with a diverse representation of our audience, where we're not chasing down this one right answer, but instead we create space for everyone to just hang in and embrace that ambiguity and stay curious. And where we're not perpetuating and creating reward systems that heighten our fear of failure, and instead really create a space where we are just all open to learning and just being wrong. And I think to round off, I want you to remember that our brain has mental shortcuts that are constantly trying to help us survive and process the world around us. But these same shortcuts are also leading us to make snap judgments, make decisions based on our biases, miss certain facts. And while we'd love to believe that we're not that biased or that other people are more biased than us, that thought in itself is a bias. And that bias blind spot can cause us to leave assumptions go unchecked and create products that are not right for our audience. So remember to map your assumptions about the audience that you're focusing on, the challenge you're trying to solve, and the solutions you're exploring. And sometimes even looking at those assumptions can really help you think about what's missing. Remember to test multiple hypotheses and to check, do they actually create the outcome that we're hoping to create? And what unintended consequences might they have? And being open to new knowledge. And I think sometimes just the simple act of reframing an idea into a hypothesis kind of reminds us that regardless of how exciting our idea might sound, it's still just a hypothesis with no data backing it up. For us, this also gave us a ton of creative freedom. We knew that we can go as big as we wanted, but our tests and our users would nudge us and give us signals on which direction to go. And co-create with your audience to empower them to come up with solutions that we wouldn't have come up with on our own. By creating space for our audience to get in the journey, we kind of get out of our own way. And create relentless teams. And being relentless means making sure that the audience that we're serving has been heard, checking to make sure that you're solving the right challenge, and that you're always testing and making sure you're aligned with your ethical standards. And to do that, we have to cultivate teams and spaces where people are encouraged to seek perspectives that are unlike their own, that they're valuing and prioritizing testing, they're staying curious, and they're OK being wrong. So instead of fighting the 180 mental shortcuts that evolution has already ingrained in us, let's instead use these four methods to uncover and challenge our assumptions so that we're making better and more impactful products for our audience. Thank you. These are just some books if anyone wants to go deeper into these areas that I would recommend. At this moment, I think I have time to take questions, if anyone has any. Yes?
How do you get around users may not want what they think or say they want? I'm thinking back to Henry Ford. If I'd asked people what they want, they'd have said faster horses.
Yeah.
I don't know whether that actually happened or not.
Right.
I'm sure that there have been plenty of times where if you do exactly what the user asks for, it'll be terrible.
Yeah.
How do you cope with that whilst obviously still taking their input into account?
Definitely. We never asked what you want. That was step one. Because I barely, what I want from day one to day two changes. So what we did was, that's why it's super critical to have a range of methods that you're using to test, from open-ended questions and interviews, just more open conversations. And we start from, we didn't hop on a phone with teens and start with so tell me about your bullying experience. We start from can you tell me a little bit about your life? What do you do day to day? How are your friends? Are you new in town? So what you're looking for is to hear their narrative. And then you get nudges towards whether they're experiencing that. So that's one. And then in terms of interactions, we don't show something and then say, would you want this? We start from same approach. We start from a place where there's a lot more blue sky and have them influence what types of interactions and they would do. That's why the co-creation is super helpful. And the testing we did with rough sketches and prototypes, what we did was it was divided into half, where one half of the conversation was around we wouldn't tell them that we're solving for teen bullying. We would tell them hey, we are creating an app that is for teens. Was wondering if we could get your thoughts on it, right? So nothing about bullying, mistreatment, nothing. And then talk about it. And they might say something like, I don't get it. What is this? Or this reminds me of this other thing I use. And then I'll be can you tell me a little bit more about that? So I think what you're doing is never asking that direct of a question, because I think that's just leading, versus you're kind of guiding and facilitating the dialogue so that you collect clues. Does that help?
Yeah.
OK. Great. Any other question? Going once. Going twice. OK. All right. Thank you.